Representative Jeff Pyle. So
Thank
Jeff,
you,
you may
Chairman.
begin.
It's always a pleasure to sit in front of Judiciary Committee. As many know, up till about a month ago, I was a member of this committee. And then I don't know if it was promoted or demoted to being a chairman. That time will tell. I don't normally write speeches, Chairman. I prefer to just offer what I'm thinking, but I felt that after watching you all put in as much time as you have on this subject, and I believe it's been 8 days, I felt I owed you a little something. So here we go. Chairman Marsico, Chairman Petrarca, and honorable Judiciary Committee members. You've undertaken a great task and spent a lot of time discussing numerous proposed bills addressing the private ownership of firearms in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I have little doubt this discussion's been catalyzed by the events at Stoneman High School in Parkland, Florida. As a former teacher, I am deeply saddened for the senseless loss of life. However, I am an owner of firearms. And as a former teacher who now serves in the legislature, I have a few thoughts I feel bear hearing. Mr. Chairman, I taught civics and American history. I hold degrees in political science and education with work towards a master's in both. I've studied the discussions held by the founders on the role and the reason for all 10 of the amendments comprising the Bill of Rights and understand them deeply. I was blessed to be taught by a former Supreme Court law clerk, Patrick Hagan, bless his heart and rest his soul. I've studied the writings of Madison, Washington, Franklin, and the other framers, and of course the obligatory Federalist Papers. It's fair to say I understand the meaning of the Second Amendment, why it was written, why it was put second, and who was in favor and who was not. The central thought was that people should be armed to protect themselves not only from the challenges of everyday life, but also to protect their inalienable rights from being taken or assaulted by their own government. That was actually George Washington's insistence. The Pennsylvania Constitution closely echoes the philosophies behind the federal Second Amendment. Each asserts the private citizen's right to keep and bear arms, and our federal and state courts have repeatedly reaffirmed this for over 230 years. Our Commonwealth Constitution goes further, stating, and I quote, "The right of the individual to keep and bear arms shall not be questioned." In my opinion, and I'm not an attorney and I know I sit in a room of attorneys, shall not be questioned leaves very little doubt as to what the people who wrote our Constitution intended. Now, by construction, we are a constitutional republic. We elect leaders to go speak on our behalf, and that's why you're here. Every single person sitting behind that high desk has at their fingertips 63,000 people that they have to speak for. I understand different parts of the state will sound off differently than where I'm from, Western Pennsylvania. But one thing we all share is that our Constitution is supreme. It is the highest law of the land. No laws may be passed subsequently that seeks to go 180 degrees away from what our Constitution gives us. Now, in a constitutional form of government, the Constitution serves as both a defining document and a confining document. It says, in essence, who does what. You and I would not sit in on court cases because we are not the judicial branch. We are not the one who signs bills into law. That is the executive branch. We are the legislative branch, the House of the people. Our Constitution stipulates very clearly the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be questioned. Now, this can change. It's possible. Like all successful constitutions written around the world, there's an amendment process. The only way we can change the wording of a constitution is by a successfully ratified amendment. Thus far, we've had no such amendment And the Constitution reads, "My right to keep and bear arms shall not be questioned." People are free to offer that amendment. Pennsylvania's process is rather easy to understand. It must be passed by a majority of the votes for 2 successive sessions before it goes on to a ballot referendum question that goes to the voters of Pennsylvania. I've not yet seen an amendment in rough form, in final form, and I certainly have not voted on one. So what is this Constitution? It's a contract of sorts between the people and the government. The government agrees to operate as written, and in exchange, the citizenry agrees to abide by its laws. The government cannot assume powers not spelled out in the Constitution, as all of those powers are reserved to the people. Within many constitutions is this Bill of Rights that guarantees the people will hold rights unassailable by the government. This model claims its origin to the year 1215, the Magna Carta, signed between King John and his nobles who had had enough of his transgressions. Now, in front of me, and I thank Exec Director Dimmick for providing this, is 3 pages of bills, each of them addressing guns. These are front and back, single-sided. I brought only one piece of paper. Article 1, Section 21, 19 words. The right of the citizens to bear arms in defense of themselves and the state shall not be questioned. You're going to hear that phrase repeatedly. Now, Mr. Chairman Petrarca, I own a semi-automatic rifle. In fact, I own a few of them. Here in about a month, I'm going to go shoot a charity trap shoot for our local Relay for Life, and I'm going to use a semi-automatic shotgun. I've been using it for 8 or 10 years now. It was my dad's. To this day, that shotgun has never been fired in anger. I also happen to own an AR-15. I've owned one for about 10 years. I like to use it to make very little holes at very great distances, but to this day, it's never shot anybody. Now, if you are to proceed with the bills limiting semi-automatics, I would say my right as a law-abiding citizen who's never been arrested have most definitely been infringed, and my rights to own that firearm will have been questioned. I promise you, we will press legal action. I don't say that to scare anybody. I'm telling you as a promise. As a law-abiding citizen who's never been arrested for a crime, I have shown no inclination whatsoever that that gun will be used in anger or to hurt people. Mr. Chairman, I've got so many things on these paper, and I honestly tried to sit down and focus it, but I have so many thoughts on this. I'm just kind of winging it right now. Now, not to be completely negative, but there are a number of measures on these sheets that this committee will be taking under consideration. I think prohibiting the mentally ill from possessing firearms makes great sense. And if you look at the events of Parkland, Florida, that young man had the police called to his house over 30 times, and it was ignored. In fact, Stoneman was not his home high school. He had been there for only 2 or 3 months prior to this horrible act. Maybe we should look at people who have been not really adjudicated, but addressed by the police. And from what I understand, this young man was fond of putting up posts on social media and keeping a journal in which he fantasized about killing people. Whether or not these things were known by the local law enforcement officials, I know not. But what I know is that we should be focused on protecting our school students, not on confiscating or diminishing someone's firearm rights. Now, one of the things I did before I got elected here, Mr. Chairman, I was a school teacher. civics, history. Another role I served was on the CRT, which is the crisis response team. I was one of 5 teachers within our building that was called out whenever something went sideways. Fist fights, bomb scares. I was the guy with the dental mirror peeking into lockers to see if the kid really had rigged an explosive. I was in a classroom on 9/11. Prohibiting the mentally ill from possessing firearms, specifically individuals who've been ordered to undergo involuntary mental health treatment, is an idea that makes sense. And that is coming from the head of the Second Amendment caucus. I can support that. There are a number of these, and to spare your time, because 8 days is a very long time, you've looked them all over. I'm not going to belabor the point, but I will tell you both respectfully, Chairman, before you go abridging constitutionally guaranteed rights, be very, very sure of your steps. I don't promise retribution, but I will press legal action. I dare you to find a criminal record for anything I've done except for an inordinate amount of parking tickets here in the city of Pittsburgh, or here in the city of Harrisburg, and a couple of speeding tickets here and then. Should we have laws to prevent people who should not have guns? Yes, in certain cases, but they have to be very closely drawn. As I said, the mentally ill. Our law currently prohibits people with a history of domestic violence from purchasing firearms. And if I may, the horrible acts that happened in Florida most likely would not have happened here because Pennsylvania already has a gun check system called PICS, the Pennsylvania Instant Check System, that does contain mental health histories. In short, that kid wouldn't have been able to obtain that weapon. Now, if we are going to ban semi-automatics, you are taking out roughly 70 to 75% of the entire sales quota. A couple of years ago, it was very popular to encourage women to undergo firearms training, and a great many did. In my home county of Armstrong, our sheriff every year has a training session for first-time gun owners to go out and handle safe gun ownership. I noticed one of the bills you could be considering requires the purchaser of a firearms to undergo mandatory training by the Pennsylvania State Police. For people that are sitting here who know our state police are very thinly spread, we simply don't have the manpower to do that. I saw no notice of an NRA pistol instructor on there, although that would make sense. I saw no mention of a militarily trained range master on there who could also teach people how to do that. In short, is it a good idea? No, I don't think so. I think it's not soup yet. It's got a long ways to go before that would be something I could support. Now, as mentioned, I chair the Second Amendment Caucus, Chairman. 88 members, Republicans and Democrats, all over Pennsylvania. And I know we will vote as a block on these measures because I will ask them to. A lot of this stuff is close, but it's not there yet. I feel it needs work. And on that note, I will close and stop wasting your time.
You're not wasting your time.
Chairman, thank you. I feel, I forget which one of the founders actually said it, but taking one person's rights takes all of our rights. And I'm not willing to give mine up yet. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Jeff, for your thoughts and your perception. You mentioned the PICS system.
Yes.
There's been attempts to legislation to abolish the PICS system.
Correct.
What is your position and the position of the Second Amendment Caucus on that legislation that would abolish the PICS system in Pennsylvania?
Opinion of the members of the Second Amendment Caucus is mixed. There's a number that would like to see it done away with completely. I wouldn't happen to be one of those. I think mental health history is an important part of this discussion. The NICS system, the National Instant Check, how it differs from the PICS system NICS system is mostly geared towards Patriot Act stuff. Do you have known collusion with known terrorists, et cetera? PICS, the Pennsylvania Instant Check System, incorporates mental health history, acts of domestic violence, any other, I believe everything from an F3 felony up and some misdemeanors. Ours is much more comprehensive than the NICS system.